My name is Alvin and I am a software engineer. Before I met Kathy, I thought I was a bit clumsy when it came to relationships, but fate always seems to deliver surprises when you least expect it. It was a fall evening, and I was at a friend's birthday party. I was sipping a cocktail alone when a figure caught my eye. She moved gracefully through the crowd, her light brown hair swaying gently as she walked. At that moment, my heart seemed to skip a beat. I later found out that her name was Kathy, a colleague of the birthday girl. Introduced by my friend, we got to know each other. Kathy was not only beautiful in appearance, but also full of charm in her speech. We chatted about each other's work and hobbies, and time passed without us realizing it. By the time the party was over, we had already agreed on a time to meet again. Since then, Kathy and I have been dating frequently. Every time I spent time with her, I felt a sense of joy and fulfillment that I had never experienced before. We explored different parts of the city and shared our lives together, and Kathy's thoughtfulness and warmth made me feel like I had found the other half of my life that I had been missing for a long time. As time went on, our relationship heated up quickly. One romantic evening, I asked Kathy to marry me, and with tears in her eyes, she said, "I do." From that moment on, she became my fiancée, my life partner. I began to envision the rest of my life with Kathy. We discussed the details of our wedding and thought about the names of our future children. Every time I looked into Kathy's eyes, I was convinced that she was the person I wanted to spend my life with. However, in retrospect, that time seems like a beautiful but fragile dream. I had no idea what secrets lay beneath the sweet surface. At that time, I was like a warrior conquering love, walking on the journey with great vigor. Little did I know that on the road to happiness, there were so many unexpected traps waiting for me to fall into. As a man about to enter the marriage hall, I should have been more cautious, more vigilant. But the sweetness of love often makes one lose one's mind. I was so immersed in every day with Kathy that I didn't realize that our relationship was heading in a direction I couldn't imagine. The vow, the promise, the love that I thought would last forever was unknowingly developing cracks. The most terrible enemy in love, not quarrels, not misunderstanding, but doubt. And the seeds of doubt, often from some minor clues. I vividly remember the moment when the cloud of doubt first settled over me. Kathy and I were watching a movie on the couch that day when her phone screen suddenly lit up with a new text message. The screen of her cell phone suddenly lit up with a new text message, and Kathy glanced at it quickly before hastily shoving it under a pillow. It took only a few seconds, but it was enough to plant a question mark in my mind. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was just a coincidence. But then similar things began to happen more often, and Kathy began to hide her cell phone screen from me more often, quickly deleting every message she received. On several occasions, when she received a phone call, she would walk briskly to the other room, deliberately lowering her voice. When I asked, she always smiled and said it was a work-related matter. I didn't want to suspect Kathy, but her erratic behavior pricked my nerves over and over again. I remember one time when we were eating at a restaurant, Kathy suddenly said she had to go to the restroom. After she left, her cell phone vibrated on the table. I opened the screen by accident and found a message from an unmarked number. When I clicked on it, the content of the message had already been deleted. Kathy came back at that moment, and when she saw me holding her cell phone, her face instantly turned pale. Another time, Kathy was traveling for a few days. I called her on the phone to tell her something interesting, but over the phone, I heard a man's voice talking in the background. When I asked Kathy who it was, she said it was the hotel bellhop. But I felt that there was something familiar about the voice, but I couldn't remember where I'd heard it before. Gradually, I realized that Kathy started to work overtime more often, and sometimes I couldn't contact her for the whole weekend. She always said that the company's new project was very tight and needed to work overtime. But every time she came back from overtime, I could always smell a strange perfume. I began to think back, trying to find clues, but the deeper I thought, the more confused. I kept telling myself that it was probably just a coincidence, that Kathy loved me, that she wouldn't betray me. But deep inside, a voice kept asking, if she really loved you, why did she hide this? Why can't she be honest with me? I started tossing and turning and couldn't sleep at night. I hated myself for being paranoid, but I couldn't control the thoughts that were swirling around in my head. Doubt is like a creeping poisonous weed, slowly eroding my sanity. Every day, I lived in torment, not knowing whether my feelings were real happiness or an elaborate deception. Finally, one day, I decided that I couldn't go on like this. I had to find the truth, even if it might break my heart. As a software engineer, I am well aware of the power of modern technology. I decided to utilize my expertise to find out more. I spent a whole week developing a cell phone spy software. It can record cell phone calls, text messages, and emails without being detected. I knew I was invading Kathy's privacy, but I had no choice. I'd rather take the blame for being a liar than reveal the truth. I installed the software when Kathy wasn't home. I spent the rest of the day in fear. I was like a peeping Tom, constantly refreshing the software's logs, fearing that I would miss any clues. At first, everything seemed normal. Kathy's calls and texts were mostly work-related. But gradually, a name began to appear more often: David. As I recall, David was one of Kathy's co-workers. I had met him a few times at company parties and remembered that he was married with 3 children. But now, I realized that Kathy's text messages with him were far more frequent than those between coworkers. More alarming to me is that the content of their text messages, full of ambiguity and flirting. Missed you. See you tonight. Had a great time last night. Next time somewhere else. Similar text messages passed between them almost every day. I saw Kathy sending David pictures of herself, either at home or in a hotel room. David's replies were always full of explicit compliments and longing. My heart sank a little with each text message. I didn't want to believe my eyes, but the evidence was there, irrefutable. I even found out that on those nights when Kathy told me she was working overtime, she was actually having a rendezvous with David in a hotel. Those so-called business trips were just excuses for her to have private meetings with her lover. The pain almost engulfed me. I felt like a big joke, like a fooled clown. I had given all my heart to this relationship, but in return I was betrayed and cheated. I wanted to question Kathy and find out what our relationship really meant to her. But I knew I had to stay calm. An accusation without proof would only make me look like a hysterical lunatic. I started collecting evidence in secret. I saved every text message, every photo, carefully. I even recorded some of their conversations. Listening to their intimate conversation, my heart was like a knife. But I realized that only hard facts can break the barrier of lies. I kept telling myself, hold on a little longer, wait a little longer. The truth will eventually come out. The process of collecting evidence was like a long torture for me. Every text message, every photo, was like a sharp knife, carving blood marks on my heart. But I realized that the only way to end the torture was to reveal the truth. I chose to tear off Kathy's mask of hypocrisy in front of her parents at a family gathering. That day, I invited Kathy's parents and my best friend Gavin over for dinner. At the table, the atmosphere seemed unusual. Kathy's smile was stiff and unnatural, and my heart was beating like a drum. Finally, over after-dinner coffee, I spoke up. I told them that I had discovered Kathy's secret, her betrayal of me. At first, Kathy's parents thought I was joking. But when I took out my cell phone and started to show them the evidence, their faces changed. I showed Kathy and David's text messages, which were full of ambiguous and erotic innuendo, flashing blindingly on the screen. I showed pictures of them in their hotel room, both of them unclothed and intimate. I even played a recording of Kathy saying, "I love you," to David on the phone, her voice soft and lingering. Kathy's mother covered her mouth as tears streamed silently down her face. Her father clenched his fists and his face turned red. Kathy, on the other hand, cowered in her chair like a frightened rabbit. At first, Kathy tried to defend herself. She said the text messages were just a joke between coworkers, the photos were taken by mistake while she was drunk, and the recordings were taken out of context, she argued, her voice getting smaller and smaller, and finally turned into a whimper. Because she knew that in the face of ironclad evidence, any lie is so pale and powerless. Gavin patted my shoulder in silence. He knew me best, and he knew what this all meant to me. I had thought of Kathy as the world to me, and we had made a vow that would last forever. But now, that vow, like a ridiculous joke, was crumbling in the face of reality. As I recall, the last thing Kathy's father asked her was, "If you really loved Alvin, why did you hurt him like that?" Kathy didn't answer, but just kept her head down, tears dripping on the table. I know that some questions may never be answered. Love is a gamble. You put your heart on the table, but do not know what awaits you in the end. Is a warm embrace or a cold blade? On that day, our engagement was officially broken off. Kathy moved out of our house, and I sent back everything that belonged to her. As I watched her back disappear behind the door, I felt a strange sense of relief. Perhaps losing an unreal relationship leaves room for true love. But at the same time, I also feel a deep confusion. I no longer believe in love, no longer believe in oaths. In my world, all the good things seem to be covered with a layer of shadow. I began to doubt my own judgment, doubt the goodness of human nature. Kathy's betrayal not only hurt my feelings for her, but also shook my faith in the world. I didn't know if I could believe again, if I could be brave enough to love again. The haze of betrayal has been hanging over my life for a long time. I was like a walking corpse, working mechanically and living numbly. I kept asking myself, why was I so blind, so stupid? Why didn't I see Kathy's true colors earlier? I began to doubt my judgment and my ability to love and maintain a relationship. The pain almost consumed me. I started drinking and staying out at night. I tried to anesthetize myself in these ways, but every time the drunkenness wore off, the reality of the pain became clearer. I knew I couldn't go on like this. If I couldn't get out of this haze, I would lose myself forever. It was Gavin, my best friend, who pulled me through. He couldn't see me giving up on myself. He advised me to seek help from a therapist and start looking at my life again. At first, I refused. I didn't believe that talking would solve anything. But Gavin kept encouraging me, telling me that facing my trauma was a strength in itself. At Gavin's insistence, I started seeing a psychiatrist. At first, I resisted opening up to a stranger. But gradually, with the doctor's guidance, I began to confront my feelings. I realized that Kathy's betrayal did not mean that I had failed, and that my pain was normal and needed to be accepted and healed. Slowly, I began to re-engage with life. I began to devote myself to my work, filling the emptiness with busyness. I began to spend more time with my family and friends, drawing strength from them. I started to try new hobbies, go to the gym, and travel to relax. Every little change helped me to reinvent myself. I remember walking in the park one day and seeing a couple walking hand in hand. There was a time when such a sight would have made me tingle. But that day, to my surprise, I realized that I was able to face it calmly. I no longer felt jealous or angry, but sincerely hoped that they would cherish each other and not make the same mistake I did. At that moment, I realized that I had begun to heal. The wound was still there, but it was no longer bloody. I began to re-examine love and life. I realized that every time we fall down, it's so that we can learn to walk forward better. Kathy's betrayal made me lose a relationship, but it also made me find myself. Even though I had begun to embrace life again, Kathy's shadow didn't seem to lift completely. She began to text and call me frequently, asking for forgiveness. She said she had realized her mistake and begged me to give her a chance to start over. At first, I chose to ignore it. I didn't want to get involved in this emotional storm again. But Kathy's persistence bothered me. Every text message, every phone call from her was like a thorn in my hard-to-heal wound. Finally, one sunny afternoon, I agreed to meet Kathy. We met at City Park, a place where we had walked hand in hand countless times. When I saw Kathy, I hardly recognized her. She was once radiant, but now she looked haggard and sad. Her eyes were bloodshot, and there was not a smile on her face. We walked in silence for a while. Finally, it was Kathy who broke the silence. She apologized again and told me that this time of reflection had made her realize how important I was. She said she was willing to change for me, to start over. I listened in silence, my mind a mixture of emotions. There was a time when such words would have touched my heart, but now, all I felt was exhaustion. I realized that I was no longer the naive Alvin, and that Kathy's betrayal had changed me forever. I told Kathy I forgave her, but that didn't mean there was a future for us. The Alvin who used to trust her and love her unconditionally is gone. The rift between us is unbridgeable. I told Kathy that I appreciated the good times we had, but that's in the past. We both need to move on and find our own happiness. It's better for both of us if we separate. Kathy was crying. She asked me if we could have been happy together if she hadn't made a mistake. I sighed and told her that there are no ifs in life. Every choice has its price and consequences. What we have to do is to accept the reality and move on. We sat on a park bench for a long time. We talked about our past and our plans for the future. As the sun began to set, we both knew it was time to say goodbye. We hugged each other like old friends. At that moment, I felt a sense of relief that I had never felt before. I knew that I had truly forgiven Kathy and myself. Our story had come to an end, but my life has infinite possibilities. As I turned to leave, I felt a sense of relief. The Alvin who had been hurt by the betrayal had been buried with the past. Saying goodbye to Kathy marked a turning point in my life. The person I was once trapped in love had vanished with the wind. I felt an unprecedented sense of freedom and relief, as if a heavy burden had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I decided to give my new life a special start. I went to the local animal rescue center and adopted a kitten. She had beautiful orange fur and bright green eyes. I named her Shiny, hoping she would bring light into my life. Shiny's arrival has injected infinite joy into my life. Every morning, she rubs against my face and wakes me up gently with her soft paws. Whenever I was tired from work, she would jump on my lap and soothe my soul with her purrs. Gradually, I realized that I didn't think of Kathy so often, and I didn't feel lonely so easily. I started to reorganize my life. I enrolled in a photography course and started learning how to capture the beauty of the world through my lens. On weekends, I would go hiking in the countryside to breathe fresh air and experience the magic of nature. I started to read books that I once didn't have time to read and savored the wisdom contained in the words. I also started to appreciate my friends and family more. I often invited Gavin and other friends to our home, where we shared our lives and discussed our dreams and plans. I started talking to my parents on the phone more often, telling them about my life and listening to their concerns and advice. Gradually, I found myself becoming more open and confident. I am no longer so easily influenced by the views of others, no longer so easily caught up in the whirlpool of emotions. I began to truly understand that happiness comes from within, from the love and pursuit of life. Of course, I have my moments of weakness. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I think of Kathy and the good times we had. But instead of dwelling on the past, I choose to look forward with a smile on my face. I know that every hurt is an opportunity to grow. It is because of these experiences that I have become the person I am today. Now, more than a year has passed. As I look back on this journey, I am overwhelmed with gratitude. I am grateful to Kathy, who taught me what true love is, to Gavin, who gave me support and encouragement during my most difficult times, and to Shiny, who brought me endless joy and companionship. I am sharing this story in the hope that it will give some insight to those who are going through emotional trauma. I want to tell them that pain is temporary and hope springs eternal. Don't deny your value just because of one failure. Everyone's life has its share of darkness and ups and downs. The key is to learn how to face them and how to grow from them. Remember, you deserve the best love and the best life. Don't let the pain of the past stop you from moving forward. Love, pursue, and embrace change and the unknown. Believe that time will heal all wounds. Believe that life will bring you unexpected surprises. Finally, I would like to use my favorite sentence to encourage you. The meaning of life is not how much you have, but how much you have experienced. Let's work together, feel every moment of life with our hearts, and create our own wonderful life. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.